Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Dharma for Difficult Times. My name is Pastor Niral, and these are evening sessions done by either myself or Pastor David in which we share a little bit of Dharma with all of you. So if it's your first time joining us, welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm just going to refresh my page so I can see who's actually come online. Before we begin, I'd just like to give a short kind of overview of what I was talking about last time. So in these couple of sessions that I'm going to be sharing with you, I'm actually going to be talking about what are known as the six perfections. Now, those of you with a little bit of a Buddhist background will know that especially within the Mahayana tradition and the Vajrayana tradition, the six perfections are emphasized quite a lot within our practice, and it's something that we should be following and something that we should be engaging in to further our own spiritual practice, our spiritual journey. And as you know, there are six perfections. So these six perfections are generosity, moral discipline, dana, sila, dana, kshanti, patience, joyous effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom. So in my last session, what I had covered was the perfection of generosity. So in today's session, I'll be covering the perfection, of moral discipline. So let's just see who's come online. We've got quite a few people online already. David Chu, hello, good evening to you. Tata Ong, hello, good evening. Kelvin Tan is also online. Pastor Hani, Pastor David. Guan Ming's also online. Tenzin Jamka is watching as well. Yo Miao Ki is online. Martin has joined us. Yiling, hello. Thank you very much for joining us again. Gillian Lin is also here. And Sukfan is also here. And I see Sharon Ong is also online. Thank you everyone for joining today's session of Easy Dharma for Difficult Times. So today I'm going to be talking more about the perfection of moral discipline. Sometimes it's referred to as ethics. Sometimes it's just referred to as morality. Sometimes it's referred to as discipline. So the way I kind of personally like to term it is actually more discipline. And again, as with the perfection of generosity, which I was talking about in the last session, you can split it into three types of actions, three types of doing something. All right. So the methodology that I'm following here in explaining the six perfections, and the first generosity, today's is discipline. I'm actually following the outline from the Lamrim, or the graded stages to the path to enlightenment. Okay, so moral discipline is split into three categories. The first category is to refrain from doing misdeeds. The second is to increase virtuous dharma. And the third is known as working for sentient beings. So I'm going to explain these three throughout this session. So the first one is refraining from misdeeds. Those of you who have actually been following my sessions since the beginning of Easy Dharma for Difficult Times will know that I spent a lot of time talking about the Four Noble Truths and karma, and then I touched on taking refuge. Now, if you remember, in taking refuge, I talked about the refuge vows. So the first part of discipline, the perfection of discipline, is actually, if you have taken any vows, to make sure that you keep them very strongly. By keep them strongly, I mean that you live by them. You live by the vows that you have taken. Now, The reason why discipline is important and refraining from misdeeds is important is if you think back all the way back to the session on karma that I had with all of you, it was that doing negative actions leads to negative outcomes, and doing positive outcomes will lead to positive outcomes. Doing positive actions, will lead to positive outcomes. And this is basically the law of karma. This is how it works. So if we remember back to what I was talking about, when you take a vow, or especially in terms of the refuge vows, it basically stops you from doing something negative. So when you stop doing something negative, automatically you actually reduce the amount of negative karma that you would have to suffer in the future. You will have to suffer in the future, because you stop it from the very root. The root of it is when you make an action or you do an action and it's negative, it will ultimately lead to a negative form of karma. So the first of the explanations on discipline actually tells you to refrain from doing any misdeeds, to refrain from doing anything negative. But it goes one step more, because at this point of the path, when you're practicing, it's kind of a given that you would have had taken some form of vow or another, whether it is a refuge vow, whether you're practicing tantra and you've got tantric vows, whether you're a monk or a nun and you've got monastic vows. All in all, you would have had some form of vow. And for most of us, that is actually going to be our refuge vows. So the refuge vows are split into 3 categories: to do with your body, to do with your speech, and to do with your mind. And the reason why they're split in this way is because these 3 things, your body, your speech, and your mind, is actually how you interact with the world. It's how you interact with it, and it's how you experience the world, and it's how you interact with other people. So all of your actions, whether it is good karma, whether it's neutral karma or bad karma, or even to generate merit, is always done with these 3: your body, your speech, and your mind. So before I get more into the refuge vows, as it were, let's just see who else has joined. Pastor Gimli has joined. Iman is also here. Ramesh is here again. Iman. Linman. Anatan is also here. JW Liu is also here. And Jacinta Benkui is also online. And Karen is also online again. And Mr. Lam. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. So what I've been talking about is the perfection of discipline or morality. And the first one is actually known as refraining from misdeeds. Now, what this actually refers to is actually keeping your vows very strongly. And the reason why you keep your vows very strongly is because it leads to less suffering for yourself or for other people in the future. So I was talking about the refuge vows, and I know we have discussed it before, but it's something that we need to always remember that we have, and something that we need to put into practice in day-to-day life. And that is the 10 refuge vows. So these vows basically stop you from doing misdeeds. It stops you from doing anything negative. And they're split into 3 categories: of your body, your speech, and your mind. So the category of the body includes stealing, killing, and sexual misconduct. So stealing here basically means taking anything that doesn't belong to you. No matter what it is. It can be small, it can be big. Anything that doesn't belong to you, you don't take it. Okay? Obviously, if you've asked permission for it from the owner or whatever, then that is a different story. But that's the definition of stealing. Now, the definition of killing is basically taking a life. Okay? It can be any life, it can be a human life, and it can even be an animal life. So that is the definition of killing. And the definition of sexual misconduct is having physical relations with people who aren't willing, and harming others through the actual act. Okay, so that's the definition of sexual misconduct, and that basically covers the body aspect of the 10 refuge vows. So what we do is we refrain from doing these three things. So we move on to the four vows of the speech. And this is where I always get confused and always forget myself. First is lying. Okay. The second is harsh words. The third is idle chatter or gossiping. And the fourth is divisive speech. Okay. So the first one is lying. So we've covered all of these in previous sessions. If you want to know more about these, you can watch the sharing I did on taking refuge when we do go into it in a bit more detail. So you have lying, which is basically not telling the truth. Then you have harsh words, which is using your speech to scold somebody, using your speech to say negative things about somebody. Then we have idle chatter and gossiping. This is when we don't have control over our speech. We're in a situation where we're quite relaxed or we're quite excited, and you just start talking and talking and talking and talking. There is no meaning behind what you actually want to talk about. There is no purpose behind it. You just want to talk about something. And the reason why this is a misdeed is because when you keep talking like this without a meaning, without a purpose behind your speech, it actually leads to lying, which I've already covered, which is another part of the refuge vows to do with your speech. And the fourth is divisive speech. Divisive speech is any speech that you use to try and break two people apart, two groups of people apart. Anytime you try and create a split between two people or two parties, basically. So that covers the four vows relating to the speech. And then after that, you get the three vows relating to the mind, which is anger, covetousness, and wrong view. So anger or hatred is something that we have covered quite in depth in previous sessions, and I know Pastor David has also talked about it a little bit as well, so I'm not going to dwell too much on that one. The next one is desire or covetousness, wanting things that, just a general wanting of things. And we all know from Pastor David's talk that having desire, coveting after something is due to exaggerating the good qualities of something. And then we become attached to it. And after we become attached to it, that's when we really want to get it. That's when our desire comes into play and we try to get it by all means. To an extent where it can cause a lot of damage and emotional pain, not just to ourselves, but to other people around us as well. And the last is wrong view. Now, wrong view has many levels to it, but on our level of practice, wrong view would actually mean not having a good understanding of what karma is, of how karma works, not understanding that merit leads to spiritual progress, spiritual transformation, and basically a general misunderstanding of what Dharma practice is and the benefits of Dharma practice. So, in a nutshell, I've covered refraining from misdeeds by summing up the refuge vows which we would have received when we take refuge. Now, one question that always comes up when I talk about refuge and refuge vows is, I haven't taken physical refuge with a guru. So that means I don't have the refuge vows. technically speaking, that means that you don't have the refuge vows, true, but you should always practice as if you had the vows. Because when you practice having the vows now, the refuge vows, and you keep them strongly, and you live by them, every minute of every waking day is when you're just about to go do something or do an action, you kind of need to remind yourself that you have these vows. And what I am doing now correct? Does it break any of the refuge vows? And this is actually the same with any other vows that you would take as well. The reason why we have vows is not just that you don't just go through a ceremony and you take refuge with a guru and then you get told that these are the refuge vows and then you just forget about it. This is something that you actually need to embody. This is something that you need to live by, and this is what leads to spiritual transformation, because it stops you from doing any misdeeds. And this practice of discipline in the six perfections is practicing keeping any vows you have. So I've covered the first part of discipline. So if you have any questions, please about that, please do ask. The second part of it is actually of discipline is actually what's known as gathering virtuous Dharma. And what does that entail? That actually means practicing the Dharma. It means practicing things like your daily sadhana. That is one really big thing that is quite crucial on our spiritual journey, especially if you aspire to reach and practice Tantra. Because in Tantric practice, one of the vows, one of the commitments that you have to take when you take initiation is to actually engage in a daily sadhana and mantra recitation every single day for the rest of your life. It can be a short one or it can be a long one, depending on which initiation you're taking. But you need to get into the habit and have the discipline to be able to hold that commitment before you actually get an initiation from your guru. So having the discipline of having a daily sadhana now, okay, and engaging in mantra recitation and using the visualizations of that particular sadhana is key. Okay, it is preparing you for the future, for future teachings. So this is something that we should actually have discipline in. And for most of us out there, one of the greatest, the sadhana that Rinpoche has actually recommended for all of us is known as the Diamond Path. So that's the joint sadhana of the Guru Yoga of Lama Tsongkhapa and the prayers to Dori Shugen. So this is the daily prayer everybody should be engaging in, unless obviously you have other instructions from Rinpoche. So gathering virtuous Dharma is not just about practicing your sadhana every day. It is also about things like making offerings every day. One of the refuge commitments is actually to make offerings every single day to the three jewels as well. So this is something that you should have discipline in doing, discipline in making your offerings, discipline in doing Dharma work. But it doesn't just stop at your sadhana and offerings. It extends and encompasses all Dharma practice, where it can be volunteering at the Dharma center. It can be giving time to your Dharma brothers and sisters when they need it. It can be any sort of Dharma practice. So that is actually the second part of the perfection of discipline. Now, the third part of discipline is something that most of us probably don't practice or don't actually practice enough of. Okay, myself included. And this is the Dharma, this is the discipline of helping sentient beings. What does this actually mean? it basically means if anybody is in pain, whether it is physical pain or emotional pain, that you should actually make time and put effort into helping that person. So things like saving animals from slaughter comes under this category. Saving humans from torture comes under this category. Helping somebody and caring for somebody who is sick comes under this category. But also, when people are going through anything emotional, helping them and giving them your time and your effort also comes under this category. So at the moment, I know that we're in MCO, or now it's not MCO anymore. Now it's I can't remember what it's termed. What is it termed? CMCO. Okay, now it's CMCO. Okay, and we're getting things are getting trying to get back to normal as much as it can, with everything still happening and going on. But now we see that some people may start slowly going back to work, but a lot of other people actually still indoors, are still at home, still suffering mentally and emotionally from everything that was happening, of being stuck indoors, of being in quarantine. You might not realize it, but it's not just it's not just yourself that's going through this emotional turmoil. It is actually everybody around you, everybody that you live with. So one of the best ways to actually practice Dharma, to practice anything in Dharma, is actually to start with, especially when you're talking about thinking other than yourself, is to actually start with the people around you. It's to start with your family. It's to start with your loved ones, especially those people that you're living with. So what does that entail? That actually entails getting out of your own head, getting out of your own emotions, and actually spending time with these people, spending time with them, understanding the issues that they may be facing, that they may be going through, and actually talking with them and trying to help them through whatever they're feeling, through whatever they're going through. Most of the time, actually, just talking about issues, especially deep emotional issues, can actually lead to a release for that person. So this is something that we should do, because it is part of the practice of discipline. Now, traditionally speaking, this third section is actually divided into 11 categories of different types of situations in which you actually help another sentient being. But in essence, all of these 11 categories actually cover one thing. If they're going through hurt, if they're going through any sort of pain, you should help them. And this is something that is actually quite liberating in and of itself. I'm not talking about liberation in the sense of gaining enlightenment. I'm talking about liberating in the sense of when you are in an emotional state, and you actually, and all of us have things going through our heads. We all have our desires. We all have things we hate. We all have, things like these going through our head. We all don't want to be in a situation, or we want to be in another situation. When we're kind of caught up in that mental anguish, I would call it, one of the keys to actually getting out of that is to actually focus out, to actually force yourself to have discipline, to focus out and focus on another person and understand the types of pain that they're actually going through, and then make an effort to try and do something to help them. So I have actually finished with covering the third category, which is working for sentient beings. So if you do have any questions, please do ask. I'm just going to do a quick roundup of the perfection of discipline. So the perfection of discipline or ethics or morality, is divided into 3 categories. The first is refraining from misdeeds. And if you've taken refuge vows or any sort of vows, this will include keeping your vows, because your vows actually stop you from doing misdeeds, stop you from doing anything that is negative, that will cause you that will cause you to have to bear the results of your negative karma in the future, and also to stop you from doing negative things to people and sentient beings around you. The second is the discipline of gathering virtuous Dharma, the discipline to actually do Dharma practice, to do something that's positive, to do something that is beneficial on our spiritual practice. And the third is the discipline of helping sentient beings out of their suffering. So whether they're in pain physically or emotionally, you go out of your way, you spend your time and your effort to help them and to heal them and to try and alleviate their suffering as much as possible. So here we have 3 types of discipline. So Luca Trinley asked a question. I have an important question for me. As an artist and Buddhist practitioner, what about beauty and attachment? Okay, you might need to elaborate a little bit further, Luca, on your question, but I will answer it as best as I can from what you've asked. You're an artist, so I guess that you paint or you do things that involve physical beauty, such as paintings or sculpture or things like that, or maybe even digital art. I don't know. There is a difference between doing something for artistic value and doing something to bring other people a sense of happiness, and on one side, and then attachment on the other. You see, attachment comes when you overemphasize the good qualities of something rather than seeing it for what it actually is. Now, as an artist, you produce artwork. Now, what is artwork? Artwork is something that, on a general level, please do forgive me, on a general level, it is something that brings visual happiness to a person. Okay, it can also, but on a deeper level, art can also embody certain ideas. It can also embody certain qualities. It can also be an expression of emotion. And that is one thing, and that is actually good. We all know that art can actually be a good form of therapy, of actually trying to convey ideas or trying to help us deal with emotions. As artists, I know quite a few artists, and they usually use their work, even if it's for a commercial purpose or something, they actually put their energy and their focus into doing this, okay? That, however, is different from being attached to it, okay? There is a difference between beauty and attachment. Attachment comes when you start to, it is not about the meaning or the ideas behind the art anymore, or the beauty, or anything that's beautiful. It is about grasping at the beauty itself. It is about when your mind is, all your mind can think about is one particular beautiful thing, say one particular painting, and you don't really think about the painting as it's just a painting. It is beautiful. It conveys these ideas, and it brings me a little bit of happiness when I look at it and when I think about it. But it is constantly being attached to that, and being attached to the idea of, or your perception of, beauty. Okay, I hope that makes more sense. And Chung has pasted quite a bit. 11 types of people that we need to work especially hard to try and help and benefit. Oh, correct. Yep, Chung's posted the 11 categories. Okay, so I'll just read them out. One is those who are suffering, those who are muddled about how to help themselves, those who have helped us, those filled with fear, those overcome with mental grief, those who are poor and needy, those who are attached to us, those whom we are able to help in accordance with their wishes, those who lead upright lives, those who lead destructive lives, those requiring us to use extraordinary abilities we might have. So Chung is absolutely correct. He has pasted this. And yep, it's according to what the Lamrim teaches about the types of sentient beings we should help. As part of the third category of discipline. Okay, so does anybody have any more questions? I can't see any more questions at the moment, so I'll probably going to wrap it up for today's session for discipline. And tomorrow will be Pastor David, and I'll be back the day after, and I'll be doing sila, dana, sila, kshanti, the perfection of patience, and that is a very interesting one. Patience. How are we going to have patience? What does it actually mean? So I'll be covering it in my next session. Oh, okay, we do have one more question. Yiling asks, with regard to helping other sentient beings, how do you deal with those who continue to need help instead of helping themselves? Okay, it's a very good question. In these situations, you kind of try your best to try and help the other person understand that actually that they're the ones that can help themselves. They're the ones that can get out of their suffering. Obviously, in the cases that we've been mentioning, especially the 11 categories that Chung posted, it's to do with helping them immediately. Okay, out of their suffering or whatever they're facing. On a grosser level, but on a subtler level, you do need to help, because there are people, as Yiling has rightly said, who actually always need help. They need help. Either it can be in everything, or it can be in one specific thing again and again and again and again. You see, with people like this, it's best if you try slowly to introduce them to knowing that actually they are the ones that can help themselves. And one of the best ways of doing that is to introduce them to the Dharma, because the Dharma is not something, you see, a lot of people, they have a mistaken view of what the Dharma is. The Dharma is not something that the Buddha gives you and then all of a sudden you become a Buddha. The Dharma is a path of transformation. But the key point to what makes the Dharma so transformational is that the power to what happens to you, positive or negative, is in your hands. And this is exactly what the Dharma teaches. And this is something that some people don't want to hear. Okay, some people don't want to hear it because they just want to keep, in this case, is to keep getting help from somebody. But slowly and surely you need to introduce them to the fact that actually they're the ones that can actually help themselves, especially if they've been in this situation for a long time in which they keep asking for help and help and help and needing help in the same thing again and again and again. You slowly introduce them to the method to help themselves. And one of those obviously is the Dharma, and it's the biggest one. So you can slowly but surely introduce them to the Dharma. Now, I know for most of us, we do have friends and we do have family that aren't Buddhist, that might not necessarily want to know about various Buddha deities or various figures or doing this mantra or doing that mantra. But the Dharma that hopefully that I've tried to share with you over these coming sessions is you can introduce it to them, you can share it with them in a non-religious aspect. I mean, doing good things is something that all religions, all philosophies out there tell us to do. It is something that is transformational. So it is something that we should try and introduce to people in order for them to help themselves if they can't at the moment. So I hope that's answered your question, and that's okay. No more questions. I don't see any more questions. So I will end today's session there, and I will see you all the day after tomorrow when I'll be discussing the morality. I'll be discussing the perfection of patience. Okay. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you. Good night.